All right, so I got a little bit of hopium here for you guys. We actually got some good news, which is very rare on this channel, okay? Don't blame me. The world is a shitty place, but we got a little bit of good news here, okay? Now, I don't know what is so accurate about this phenomenon, but I've seen this tweet floated around recently, and I think that it's true for some reason. You guys can maybe explain that to me down in the comments, but it's pointed out here by Sock Done Left. New York Dems with a supermajority versus Midwest Democrats with a 1-vote margin, obviously comparing them to Bill and Hillary Clinton versus Lenin. And again, I don't know why this is the case, that some of these Midwest Democrats have so much, larger balls than some of these Democrats in more like neo-lib centered cities like New York or San Francisco or Atlanta or whatever the case may be. But they've just been absolutely killing it recently. So Minnesota, basically in their state legislature, they recently got a trifecta, the entirety under their control with the governor, the House, the Senate within their state. And so they managed to pull this off. So here for More Perfect Union, they say Minnesota is on the verge of passing a dramatic victory for workers that would ban captive audience meetings, create a board to set minimum labor standards for nursing homes, improve workplace safety and rights for warehouse and meatpacking workers, and more. And again, they point out after winning a trifecta in the state government in November, Democrats are moving to pass a package as a part of an appropriations bill. The Senate will likely pass the bill on Tuesday before a House vote as the session comes to a close. So we're going to hear from some of the people who are testifying on behalf of this or speaking on behalf of this. But I mean, what the hell? Why is this not stuff that we could be seeing aggressively pushed from the federal level by some of our Democrats in DC? I mean, I know that it gets frustrating. I'm obviously frustrated by it endlessly when I'm commentating on this channel about the National Democratic Party. They're absolute dog shit for the most part. They barely ever fight for the things that they even claim to fight for. I mean, remember Joe Biden running on the public option as, oh, this is going to be the more reasonable alternative to Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All. Hasn't said a single thing about the public option since he took office, right? Letting the $15 minimum wage get obliterated by a couple of members of his own party. I mean, so many different examples, not fighting for the PRO Act, letting Build Back Better get burned into a million pieces by members of his own. So many different examples that we could give of Democrats at the federal level being absolutely pathetic. And yet we have examples like this of how successful even a small majority in a state like Minnesota can be when you're actually trying to legislate on behalf of the people. Now, again, I understand it's very frustrating when we're talking about national politics. There's a lot of people who check out from electoral politics because they're like, listen, there's not that much of a difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats don't actually fight for what they say that they believe in. All of that may be true to a large extent, but this is an example of why it actually can be extremely important to vote in, especially some of these more local elections. They have much greater ability, or at least they're much more competent at being able to do things that will directly, materially improve people's lives within these various states. So, I mean, this was absolutely amazing. You'd love to see it. So let's just go ahead and hear from some of them who were talking about why this kind of stuff is so important. So here first we have one of the employees who has been affected by some of these captive audience meetings, which again is basically, we saw this with the Amazon union drive, where they your managers will force you and your workers to come to some of these meetings during work hours, and then they'll propagandize you against the idea of forming a union. So let's hear what he's got to say about this.
Now, as an employee, saying no to your boss is a radical thing. And when the boss sits you down and explains to you why you should not do a thing, it's scary to say no. And that's why these protections in banning captive audience meetings, or at least making them non-compulsory, is so important. Because now it's a matter of choice between the workers and not anybody else, the way.
Right. And I mean, another part on top of that is in a lot of these states, you'll have the ability for some of these corporations to hold these captive audience meetings to spread anti-union propaganda. I mean, we saw this with the Amazon one. They went to every length they possibly could to get their anti-union propaganda across to the workers. They were like putting signs up in bathroom stalls and just all of these different tactics that they use, right? In addition to obviously the captive audience meetings. But then at the same time, they'll put in place rules where like some of these workers, like you're not allowed to go have a meeting on the grounds of your workplace in order to advocate for the union. I mean, if anything, if they catch a whiff that one of their employees is trying to formulate some sort of an attempt at making a union at the workplace, they'll probably just fire them or punish them or put them on a terrible shift and make their life an absolute hell. I mean, that's the reality of trying to form a union, because we just don't have those adequate labor protections in place. And so it's good to see them actually addressing this. We also had an example here of a nurse within Minnesota. Her name is Teresa Bates, who is basically saying that the ratios that, and this is a big problem across the United States healthcare system, the ratios of the amount of patients that some of these nurses are having to take care of at one time has just become completely untenable. I mean, you went from having to take care of just like a couple of different patients to having to take care of 4, 5, 6 different patients at the same time. It's impossible. You're not going to be able to give them the adequate treatment, the adequate time that they deserve. And that's because a lot of these hospitals, a lot of these corporations want to cut costs. They don't want to hire more people. They especially want to use, more gig workers or people who are not actually directly hired by this place for a long term as an actual employee. They're trying to get those independent contractors. They're trying to scrape as much profits out of this healthcare system as they physically can. And it's coming at the expense of patients. It's coming at the expense of me and you. And it's especially coming at the expense of the nurses on top of that. So, I mean, again, massive credit to the Minnesota Democrats, I guess. And this wasn't the only thing that they did recently. We also had this one that I covered on this channel a couple months ago, back from February. They say here from CBS News, Minnesota, House passes universal school meals, providing free breakfast and lunch to students. I mean, again, you're killing it. Keep it going. Keep pushing that needle. I mean, again, this is something that really bothers me about the federal level Democrats, is that they seem to think that doing things like this are like borderline number one impossible, but also won't really be that politically advantageous. I mean, we're talking about a very narrow majority that these Minnesota Democrats are working with. And I guarantee you, the fact that they are able to get a lot of these things done, that is not only going to help the people within their state, it's also going to help them win again in the next political cycle, in the next election cycle, rather, because people are going to see, oh, you're actually capable of doing things to directly materially improve my life. Wow, what an amazing concept. It's almost like that's the entire point of living in a democracy and having a functioning government that actually represents the people. But so that was another example of this. And of course, we've had conservatives absolutely freaking out about all of this. There was this hilarious article that was posted in Fox News here by Peter Kasperowitz. He says, Democrats demand universal free breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and a snack for kids in school. Oh, how dare they? These absolute monsters. I mean, these are the same guys, right? I don't know the personal politics of Peter, assuming by the headline here and assuming by how he framed this issue, right? Talking about, oh, there's no mention of how they are going to fund it and how they're going to pay for this and where that money's going to come from. Okay, so, I mean, we obviously could get a little bit of an idea from this guy, but, I mean, we're talking about the Republican Party, who is overwhelmingly against things like the basics, right? Feeding children. And they're the same people who claim to be the party of Jesus Christ, right? I mean, famously, Jesus Christ hated feeding people, right? Jesus Christ never in a million years would give a free lunch to people, right? When he made all of those, the infinite loaves and fishes trick that he did, I think he did infinite wine as well, credit to him for doing that part of it. But, he does this infinite loaves and infinite bread. And then he famously turned around to the people who were, starving and hungry in front of them. And he said, this is going to be $10 each. Okay, you got to pay me. You got to pay me for this shit, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? I mean, it's just absolutely amazing levels of hypocrisy coming from these people, just like not even willing to pretend to stand up for the values that they make a core part of this sort of like right-wing theocratic nationalist agenda that they push for on a regular basis. So, I mean, there you have it. Again, a little bit of rare good news on this channel. Keep it up, Minnesota Democrats, and Democrats at the federal level, in the House and in the Senate as well. Maybe take a couple cues, because again, it's not just benefiting the American people, it will also benefit your chances in upcoming election cycles if you can prove that you are effective at actually following through on some of the things that you claim to believe in.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying